All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire, welcoming topics and thought leaders of the day to join up in this online home for the community. I'm your host, Kiki L'Italienne, and wow, times they are changing and not always for the best, right? A crisis can come in all kinds of forms, but what do you say to your members when a never before seen virus, I can get it out there, appears and no one knows for sure what will happen next? What do you say? What's your strategy for talking to the board or working with international chapters? What do you say to members and how and when? Obviously, with the coronavirus, we're in new territory, and a lot of the old playbooks for communications don't always work when things are dramatically changing daily. There are many perspectives to a discussion about crisis communications, but today I wanted to focus on how the collaboration between CEO and communications director can encourage a stronger connection between association and its members during difficult times. So, with that, I invited Peter O'Neill and Andy Cutler to be my guests today. Peter's the Chief Executive Officer of ASIS International, the largest global membership organization for security management professionals that crosses industry sectors from operational to cybersecurity. And Andy Cutler serves as the Director of Communications there for ASIS. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
All right. So, oh, wow. You know, what a time we've been having. It's been a little hectic lately, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Things have been happening rapidly with the virus, how it's been progressing and how it's been impacting businesses, industries, countries all over the world. And it's definitely not business as usual. Can you talk to me a little bit, and I'll start with you, Peter, can you talk to me a little bit about when all of this really started taking place so that you knew you were going to have to start shifting your communications, when it was really becoming real?
Sure. So I think in some ways, as a global organization, we were a little bit lucky because we have staff that sits in Brussels and covers that part of the world for us. We have very strong leaders in other regions of the world, not necessarily paid staff yet. And we very much saw what was happening, certainly not just from the news and the normal outlets that you would see, but certainly from our European-based staff. And so we probably had, I would say, probably maybe a 10-day head start to be able to look at our business continuity plan, sit down with our what we call first level team, take a look at it, evaluate it. What steps did we start taking? We began to evaluate what programs were coming through April. At that point, we later switched to May, switched through May. We started talking about what might we do at HQ. We're already set up to be virtual if we need to be, laptops, all the infrastructure. We did a little bit of testing on that, little load testing. We had a terrible flash flood here about 9 months ago in the summer. And about a year ago, in the summer. So we knew what it was like to have to suddenly virtually work with literally no notice. And so we had already sort of tested our systems a bit, but we did a little bit of load testing and so forth, and really geared ourselves up with messages. Having Andy Cutler in the room with us from the beginning, as we talked about the what, the why, the who, the when, and that shifted almost daily, day by day. Sometimes half a days it would shift. But putting Andy in the room from the beginning really helped us, I think, ultimately craft messages more quickly and get them out more quickly. We were fortunate in that way.
I think it's excellent when you can take something that I guess now there's a little bit of a silver lining to the fact that you had a test run with making sure that you had processes in place, and and so so Andy, when you're thinking about the messaging, when you were trying to craft this and working with Peter on this, how is the novel pandemic and crafting messaging around that different from other types of, there are all different types of situations where you have to be delicate, internal politics, the external politics. This isn't either of those. This is something totally different, right?
I would agree with that. I would go one step further and even say that if most people were to look at their crisis management, most communications professionals were to look at their crisis communications plan, Peter, I'm going to use the operative term that Peter used earlier, which is business continuity. is there business continuity sewn and woven into the fabric of that plan? And if there isn't, an organization really has to be asking itself not only why, but how do we fix that? How do we adjust for that? Our plan, we were fortunate in what Peter had said earlier. We had our own mini crisis in terms of a flood in the office, not anything nearly like what's going on right now globally, but it did activate certain things about what worked well, what we could improve upon. And so the point, I guess, with crafting messages and crisis communications in general, Kiki, I would say to you and your viewers would be, it can always evolve. It can always be better. If you have that perspective, then it won't be stagnant and you won't keep making the same mistakes over and over. So we're fortunate in our membership base in that we, as Peter can attest, we have an incredibly active group of individuals who do not see themselves as competitors, but rather they're as colleagues, and they collaborate on a daily basis. So our response in many ways was truly a reflection of the people that we represent, in that it was collaborative, it was inclusive. And I think when you make a process inclusive, and you and I had a chance to talk about this the other day, that the outcomes tend to be better than when people are just hunkered down in a war room trying to make decisions in a vacuum. And that's not what's happening at ASIS, fortunately.
So, and we had such an excellent conversation the other day. I think that a lot of people would love to have members who are able to collaborate and discuss things more openly. A lot of associations are, unfortunately, don't have that. They're kind of keeping to themselves. This is a different kind of time, though, where we all have the same enemy. It's a virus. And so it is an opportunity, it seems, for groups to come together, maybe in a way that they haven't before. How have you been facing some of the challenges that your particular members have with maybe, I would guess, I don't know a lot about the different types of security operations and all of that, but a lot of them have to show up, right? Security, you have to show up, you have to be there. You can't hunker down and stay home all the time, right?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, I think, Andy, build on this, if you will, but, I think there's a couple of different answers here. It's not one answer. It's sort of a little bit layered, if you will, right? So first and foremost, many of our security management managers and directors and CISOs and CSOs, right? They are first responders in a situation like this, right? For the obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Their day-to-day guard force all the way up through the chains of the C-suite. And so for members like ours, for the most part, when something like this occurs, or there's a natural disaster that occurs or something like this, they're first responders, right? So they're standing things up and they're putting their protocols in place, and they're implementing their business continuity plans, all those things you'd expect their companies to do. And then the scene unfolds, or the situation unfolds, and now they're playing different roles. Maybe they're no longer the first responder, they're now monitors. They move to a monitoring role. And it depends, of course, on the size of your organization and where you're located and what your responsibilities are. So for a lot of our members, we're actually, depends on what part of the world you're in right now, right? Pandemic. So in fact, in our senior leadership management team call that Andy and a bunch of us were on today, we're beginning to look at this more regionally. So first we set up global resources, and now we tend to look at this more regionally and say, look, Asia Pac largely looks like it's starting to come through what we're going to call COVID recovery. So the products and services, the learnings, the knowledge transfer they need from us right now is very different than Europe, who is very much in the throes of COVID, right? And so right now, what we see them is what we call COVID. What do I call it? COVID today, I think, Andy, is what I called it in our meeting. COVID today means what? It means asynchronous learning. It means giving them access to business continuity plans or resilience plans that they need right now. Giving them our ASIS Connects platform, which is similar to ASAE Collaborate, where they can share information real time. We're not going to put out a webinar on ethics today. We're not going to put out a webinar on how to study for our certification exams today, because that's tone deaf to North America, to Europe. In North America, we have a program taking place later this week that was being pre-promoted, and the subject is Nancy Green told me the subject this morning. I can't remember what it was, but it's not pandemic related. It's not response related, et cetera, et cetera. We have 482 people that have registered. Do we cancel that, or do we go on with it? We're going to go on with it because 482 people have registered. Now, if 25 people attend, it's recorded. So we'll meet the needs of the 25. It'll go asynchronous. It'll be in our learning management system, et cetera, et cetera. So I say this to say we're having to scale regionally now. We went to the globe. We got our resources stood up. We figured out the macro stuff, and now we're getting to look at it by regions because of the way this disease is progressing. And so we'll treat Europe right now differently than we'll treat North America, but we'll learn from Europe,
right,
as we learn from Asia Pac. So we'll be able to cascade the learning or have it have a domino effect for us. So by the time we're in the throes of, say, COVID here in the next 10 days, 14 days, and the Europeans are hopefully beginning to come out of it a little bit, we're going to be able to continue to learn from them and redeploy resources, asynchronous resources where we can. So we're very much a learning organization. This is all happening real time. We have a great plan, but that plan evolves and iterates every day, half a day, by an hour sometimes, et cetera, et cetera. And I think last thing I'll say about this at this point is, here at ASIS, we are fortunate. We have a great team. We have been working together for 4 years to reset this organization in a way that's been, I would say, fairly intense. And all of a sudden, boom, this gets put on our lap at a time when we as an organization, we're starting to sort of hit a stride, if you will, and come out of some of our resetting. And we're faced with this. But where we're lucky and where we're fortunate and where we've planned for this is we're all working so well together across all these traditional and atraditional lines of our work. We got 90 staff, we're global, and that just means we got more ground to cover. People think, oh, you got so much money and so many resources and so many staff. You never have enough money, you never have enough staff, right? And so where I think we're very fortunate is we have a great team in a company called Exempla in Brussels. 5 of them that pivot literally at the spur of a moment. We've got 90 staff here who have demonstrated our ability to pivot and really work with each other. And that's maybe the last point to make on this. Really, the most important thing for our team right now is that they are well physically and they are well mentally. And what we're saying to folks as we go virtual today, we've been liberal telecommute for the last 10 days, and we go hard stop today at the office and hard close today. We're ready for this, but people need to take care of themselves. The work will be here. The work needs to get done, but people need to take care of themselves. And that right now, really to our staff team, is our primary message.
It is an interesting set of problems and challenges that we're facing because, even no matter what our organizations go through, it's not usually impacting all of our personal lives at the same time. And so at the same time,
or the globe.
Yeah. And so all of us are going through additional stress, additional adversity, while we're trying to solve the problems that we need to solve, and still show up for our members. And it's just an interesting time. Kate says, I feel like it's easier to communicate with members during this time because the message is more about offering them help and resources. Being in marketing right now is very awkward communicating to the public and non-members. How to promote value without seeming callous or tone deaf, especially since this is going on for most of spring. Great point.
Andy, I think Andy Cutler, maybe talk a little bit to Kate about what we talked about this morning in terms of not being tone deaf. That's sort of the general how to market in the time of COVID conversation. I think you could really help Kate and other folks in what she's saying.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about in the call that Peter was just referencing was this. I think you hit the nail on the head, that we're living in this really unique period of time. I don't think I'm the first person to say that. That's not really a profound statement, but I do think that what's interesting, one of the dimensions of this, which makes it a very complex situation, is we're living in this time when people's personal lives and their professional lives have now had a head-on collision, right? Unavoidable. And so what you do with that is really important. I think, again, I never thought I'd be able to evoke the late, great Frank Zappa in an association chat, but he has this great quote, which is, "Without deviation from the norm, progress is not possible." And I think that what I'm learning every day, what Peter's teaching me, and what I think we're learning at ASIS as a group is that there is a silver lining here, which is becoming better, becoming stronger,
Right.
becoming more resilient. It's
Right.
not about perfection anymore. I think a lot
Right.
of times there's this veil, this cloak that communications professionals have, and I say this as one that never let them see you sweat, or about perfection in messaging and all that stuff. All those rules, right, are out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And the slate and the whiteboard is literally clean, and we can actually be the masters of our own destiny here. And I think that we're choosing as an organization very proactively to use this moment that matters as a way to adjust and become better on the other side of it.
Yeah, I agree. Kate, I almost want to add one thing to Kate. Kate, in our management, I think it was largely a management team meeting. There were a lot of people on the call today.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the language that I've tried to use, and I think we're now trying to use in our organization. We right now are taking a wholesale look at first of all, we have stopped all messaging for the most part for the next 48 to 72 hours out of ASIS. That doesn't specifically relate to resources that right now, in what I call COVID today, for our members in North America in particular, North America, Europe in particular, which is where the largest group of our members come from. We have another couple, 2,000-3,000 in Latin America, another couple of thousand in Asia Pac, but really 80% of our membership, if you will, sits in North America. That does not include Mexico, but in our definition, and of course Europe. So about 85% of our members sit largely in those two regions. So this helps frame it. But the conversation we've had here is this: we can't be seen as tone deaf.
Mm-hmm.
And what I call the difference between marketing and communications is exclamation point, period. We're going to be a lot more comms and a lot less marketing.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, we're launching our 20,000 person annual meeting reg launched Friday. We delayed it a full week to really tweak our messaging. So when we launched our annual meetings website, if you go look at gsx2020.org, you will see that we did not come out with register for our meeting because you should. No, we came out with, hey, we get it. A lot going on. By the way, reg is opening. You can register with confidence knowing that we have a satisfaction guaranteed program, or we'll make it right. And we have a bona fide program like that, which means in this case, you register with confidence knowing if you can't attend ASIS's annual meeting in Atlanta with your 20,000 global peers because of COVID, post our normal cancellation time, we will make it right. So I think I say this to you, Kate, to say you should probably take a wholesale look at all of your messaging right now from both marketing and comms relative to products and services. Decide which ones you're going to put to the side. My members right now, ethics is a very big thing for them. But if I try to put out an ethics webinar right now, that would be tone deaf. On the other hand, we'll do resilience programs. We'll do programs around good mental and physical and, thus and so health. And how do you, get somebody from Edelman on to talk about, how do you manage to the C-suite if you're in that role, and how are you messaging to your day-to-day staff, so to speak, right? We'll look at COVID through the lens, in our case, of security management, and we will help our members in that way. And I think the last thing I'll say is the theme of this has been, don't be tone deaf. Mm-hmm. Don't be going out marketing. Oh, come sit for my certification program. By the way, Prometric just shut down all of their testing sites. So they couldn't even do that right now. So I just would say, don't be tone deaf. Look back at your messaging. Look at what you've got coming out the next 10 days. Say yes to some people, no to others, and get them to come along with you to understand why this is about a period, not an exclamation point.
Yeah, I loved Kate's point too when she mentioned it's a great time to talk about offering help and supplying the resources, much like you were talking about your COVID today messaging, which is this is what you need now, about that's relevant to you now, versus pitching, launching, doing a lot of this stuff that is gimme,
Exactly.
no one really has time for it, and no one is in that zone right now. She said,
go ahead.
I was just going to bring up another thing that she had to say, which was she saw people reminding others online to halt auto messages, especially the programmed social media. And, now it's completely inappropriate, some of these messages that come out that do seem tone deaf, and I'm sure you've seen them too. I saw something in the events community, of course, which has been hit terribly. Meetings in the association industry, it's just decimated. For those associations who rely heavily on revenue that comes from annual meetings and just multiple meetings that they have throughout the year, it's devastating. And for those suppliers who support those meetings, equally as devastating, if not more so. And so people are wondering if they're even going to be able to continue to do what they're doing. In the meantime, I saw a calculator being promoted for figuring out your AV costs for your next event. And I thought, this is a terrible time.
Really? That's tone deaf, people.
Oh, promote that now. No one's trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah. Look, let's talk about revenue for a second, right? Because I don't want to come across as being impervious to revenue challenges. We're a $30 million organization. We're 90 staff. This organization has been running a deficit budget. The 4 years before I got here, we closed that significant revenue gap, but we're still spending deficit right now. I've got about 20 million bucks in the bank. Sounds like a lot of money, except when you're deficit spending, when you're not going to hit revenue goals, and the market's continuing to tank. That puts a three-way pressure on resources. So to be clear, and Andy and I and the team talked about this today, right? I'm not tone deaf to our revenue issues. So as the CEO, I'm not saying to the staff team, oh, gosh, we don't need to make any money. We don't really need to worry about that. We do. But the thing is, we're not going to make the money anyway, and we're going to look tone deaf if we don't address the messaging. So I don't want to lose the money, and I'd like to actually be proven wrong that we won't, a la the webinar that we're having at the end of this week that people already signed up for. We'll see how many show up. Time will tell. But I guess my point is, none of us can, I don't know anybody that can afford to walk away from revenue. I don't care what's going on in the world. I'd love to meet that person on the one hand. On the other hand, you can't jeopardize the future by looking so, again, tone deaf by continuing to just put things out there. If you've never done free webinars before, now's the time to do them. If you've never set up an asynchronous learning via a podcast or something, relatively inexpensive, now is the time to do it. Because on the other side of this, your brand reputation is going to be what you're remembered for. I have lots of little pithy association statements I make, a little pithy sayings that people that work with me laugh at. And anyway, someone made a video about it one time, but that's another discussion. But members are unencumbered by three things: facts, budgets, and organizational politics. So I'm going out and looking at all my current competitors and saying, what are we doing better together? Because I'm losing money, you're losing money. We're all after the same resources, the same speakers, the same experts. We're all doing asynchronous learning, webinars. We're all some of us have a great Andy. Well, nobody has the best Andy because we have Andy, but people have comms people, right? How do you marshal those efforts in a way that you get your brand out there, they get their brand out there? It's a win-win. So we lose less money together, but more importantly, the memberships that we serve, the industries that we serve, they see that we're working together because, again, they're unencumbered by facts, by budgets, and by organizational politics. And I think there's a real opportunity here for all of these associations that we all do business with to really think better, different, more, and really get out there and push the envelope of what they might ordinarily do. If we don't do that, many of our organizations, they won't survive this. They don't have the resources. They don't have the reserves. They don't have the volunteer leadership. They maybe don't have the staff leadership. You're going to see a lot of associations on the other side of this be really hurt, and mostly by this resulting economic tsunami that is just practically over top of us right now, and it's still not done. And I think 18 months from now, we're going to see a different association landscape, sadly.
I do too. I think that I see so many people trying to pivot and trying to do things, especially consultants who are in the space who are trying to figure out, okay, what I had planned, speakers in the space, like what I had planned, where I was going to be making my money, how I was going to be. Everyone's trying to pivot. Everyone's trying to figure out, okay, this source of revenue is not necessarily going to be there, or just absolutely won't be. Now, what do I do? And how do I make things work? And so I think the best thing we can start out by doing now is having empathy and understanding that it's not about that pushing and promotion. It's about seeing where other people are too, and understanding we're all trying to figure this out. Emily says,
"Hi." Not the exclamation point.
Yeah. Hi, Peter and Kiki. Hi, Emily. Would love to hear.
Emily.
Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on a board member who is well-intentioned about offering service. Oh, I think I know where this is going. Offering services to all members, but the services are really quite outside of the association purview. I gently told him this, and the response was, we should make everything available to all people.
Emily, my friend, I feel for you. And you're not the only person going through this. Here's what I would say. Member to member, staff to staff, right? CAE studying 101. Your board chair must have this person stand down. I would imagine, I know Emily, for everyone's sake, Emily and I have a relationship, so I know a little bit here. Emily, I believe you all have a conflict of interest statement that your boards sign every year. If you don't, everyone should have that, right? If you don't have that to fall back on, you've got to get your board chair to stop this person. It's going to tarnish the entire brand of the organization. This guy isn't just a member, he's a board leader, and he's going to be viewed as whatever he's doing. It is, to me, a part of risk management. I love to use the word, this is a whole nother Kiki program we could do. I manage from a point of risk. What risk and X am I willing to accept? HR, business management, revenue yield, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, this is about risk related to brand, related to what your board member is doing. And I appreciate that you tried to do take it for the team and get him or her, I think it's him, to stop. And that's great. I probably would have had my board chair do it first, but now I would definitely have my board chair. Now, if it is my board chair, then I'd get the president-elect or somebody else. I don't know. You go to somebody else. And Emily, you and I can chat offline about this too. But I think there is no gently.
Yeah.
His peers are going to tell him he is going to harm the reputation of the brand that you all share if he continues to do this, and he must stand down, especially if the product is outside of the association's purview. Andy Cutler will attest to the fact that one of our guiding North Stars this morning in our staff meeting, or yes, this afternoon, in our management team meeting, was what we do must be put through the lens of the security management practitioner. What we produce can't, largely be what you can get from the AMA or SHRM. We might reference SHRM resources. We might reference epidemiology resources. We might reference, business continuity resources. But what we do, what we sell, what we communicate must be from the lens, or put through the lens of the security management practitioner. So I don't know if that helps you, Em, but we can chat offline too if you want.
Yeah,
I love it. Go ahead. Yeah,
I was just going to add one more thing to Peter, what Peter just was talking about. Some people might say that's a bit restrictive or constrictive in some ways. It adds a sense of clarity, but two, it doesn't mean that there's no interpretation on that. That's a contextual place to start. So for us, it's through the lens of the security professional, but the security professional is interested in risk management, right?
And communications and leadership.
Right.
And
so the mental health of employees is risk management. The actual facilities is risk management. The cyber health of an organization is risk management. And so we're able to have a fairly expansive perspective on that through that seemingly narrow lens.
So, and Emily's not the board chair, thank goodness. Yes, thank goodness. Great question. And I'm really happy for you on that one. So Andy, I was curious because we had spoken before, and I know that you've had a lot of experience working with a lot of different groups. And you are very skilled in understanding how to communicate all kinds of different things to different people in challenging times. But how has communicating during a pandemic been a different kind of challenge? Or what are maybe some of the questions that you've been asking yourself as you've been going through as a communicator? Because I know for me, it's been a challenge to figure out with my own communities and my own audiences what is appropriate and what's not. And for those who are trying to figure out, am I being tone deaf? Is this the right kind of thing, that I should be saying? What have you been facing, or what has been challenging you?
Well, I think one other dimension to it is the element of social, right? So
Yes.
that's a whole nother animal and beast that's interconnected to this play. But listen, again, I'm not saying that we're perfect and our approach is perfect, but what I am saying is I think we're going about it the right way, in that we've created teams internally regarding content that exist, that have members from our magazine on there, that have members, our editorial team, have members of the communications team on there, and others, so that we're acting as each other's safety net. So again, a lot of times the reaction to these kinds of situations in the past where I've been a part of them, whether it be in government or in healthcare industry, has been to kind of hunker down in a bunker and just push out stuff. And that may have worked before, but that certainly is not going to work now. And so the importance of having cross-functional teams, I mean, Peter mentioned that we're about a 90, 100-person organization, which to some that may sound like a lot, to others that may not sound like that much. But I can tell you with 100 people roughly, things can slip through the cracks. The left hand might not know what the right hand's doing, that there aren't systems in place to prevent that. And so as we move forward every step of the way, one consistent question we keep asking ourselves is, who else needs to be in the room? It's not restricted in nature. It's more inclusive in nature. And it doesn't mean perfection is the ultimate outcome, but we're more likely to be in a positive situation having that perspective.
Yeah, I think, Andy, you make such a good point to our friends listening in now and in the future. Bigger is bigger. Bigger is more complex. We're trying to keep an entire learning team of 6 or 7 plus other people who have, I'll call it, niche learning responsibilities across the organization in sync with one another. We're trying to keep our messaging and all that overlaid consistent. I happen from a management perspective, I look at the magazine as an extension of knowledge and learning. I don't look at the magazine as a magazine. I look at it as a part of our knowledge and learning team. That's why at both my last organization and at this organization, the magazine reports through our chief learning officer, because it is not just a magazine. Yes, that's the vehicle, but it's a knowledge disseminator. And I don't look at it any different than that. It happens to be in the form of a print or electronic piece, but it's a platform, it's a vehicle, it's another way to get knowledge out. So we were fortunate in 18 months ago, we formed our content strategy. We developed our content teams. We had those teams stood up. Now, we've turned them on their ear, those content teams, which had structure around them, and they were structured for going along a whole year's worth of time, right? And planning for the next year, the so-called content calendar. Oh, we got now, boom, right? That's done. And so our magazine editor, the amazing Teresa Anderson, she's our content strategist, and she works closely with Nancy Green, our chief learning and strategy officer. Terry and her team have amped up, and they've actually changed their teams out. And you see Andy Cutler from our comms team and our Marcom team now woven through them. The last quick thing I'll say, here's another example of pivot for us at ASIS. We will not do another live event. So we have canceled all of our live events other than our annual meeting in September. We have canceled our live events basically through August. We didn't really have that many in the summer anyway, frankly, not to sound so dramatic, because, but we did cancel our 2 programs in May. Did cancel 2 important VIP programs in May. We had to cancel our ASIS Prague event, April 1st and 2nd, took about a $500,000 loss on that. We canceled that, by the way, 2 weeks ago, criticized by some for doing it,
And now,
what we knew was the right thing, right? And
right.
so what it is, we've canceled our live events through August. Again, really, we were done in May for them. We will probably not sign any contracts for live events to start before Q1 of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll play this by ear. Every live event we plan in the future, not only do our live events now have a digital or a virtual component, now we will ramp that up even more. So those that have live events with no virtual components, I think one of the huge lessons learned here for associations, no matter the size of your meetings, 20,000, 1,000, 30,000, even where we already have a pretty good virtual component for ours, that will have to be ramped up. That team's gonna have to look at it. Part of our pivot is this. I got 2 or 3 people that work on live meetings only. Effective last week, effective 7 to 10 business days ago, we talked with them. We sat down with them and said, we need to repurpose you for virtual. The good news for you is you're going to get a whole new skill set and you're going to get exposed to a whole new thing to put on your resume. This is good for you. And it's what we need right now. Are you in or are you out? Oh, 100% in. Great. Right. Our Marcom team is, when I say catching up, that is not a reflection on them. When I say that, we're now getting to Marcom and messaging and emails and social media and all that. Right. And we're saying, let's form a group that cuts across Marcom and learning and knowledge to figure out what are the overarching messages going to be. Going back to this answer to Kate's question, what will we stop doing?
Mm-hmm.
It's peripheral right now, but be ready for that on the COVID recovery side. Take that what you were going to, like our virtual programs that will halt, we're not going to cancel them. We're going to postpone them. We're going to put them in the hopper. And when COVID recovery comes, boom, we'll come out of the gate with programming while we pivot all of our staff's time to COVID today in Marcom, in knowledge and learning and so forth. So I'm an and guy. I don't like or. I'm always about and at ASIS the last 4 years here, we've become more and more an and organization. And today the conversation with the management team was, it's time for or, right? I'm not wired like that, so that's hard for me. So you all are going to have to help me when I go to and. You go, no, you told us or, because in order to make this sort of COVID today pivot, it can't be and. I cannot ask my team, especially virtual, especially when, not to be callous, some of us are going to get sick.
Yeah.
Some of our family members are going to get sick. We may be down 20% of our staff at some point, 30% of our staff. So we're heading into this believing we're 90 staff. In the middle of this, we may be half that. We may be 3/4 that, right? So we have redundancies in place where we need them. We don't really have a third team in line, although we pull it together if we had to. But I say that these are the sorts of pivots that we all have to be able to make. And if we're a staff of 1, that's harder. But if we're a staff of 90, it's also hard. So it's not about size. It's about getting your mind around it and getting some plans in place.
There are so many things that you're talking about that I think, I obviously this is going to have to be an ongoing discussion because I just want to follow up on so many ideas. Some of the things that you were talking about, including your perception about ramping up, what this means for ramping up your events on the digital side, offering those digital or virtual components in the future is fascinating. And I think that in the event space, they would love to know what that looks like, because I know a lot of people in the event space are trying to figure out how can I provide the types of solutions in the future, and what does this mean for my in-person? I'll tell you one thing I've been hearing a lot of people say is that they think that when there are these in-person events in the future, that because we've all had this big break from being able to do them, that when we are coming together in the future, that people will have more value on them. They'll place more value on those. And probably, what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's truth to that. I've been saying for the last 20 years, and I see that Kate's got another question here. Kate, we'll get to that in 1 second. Chapters are a good question. I love to say the annual meeting is dead. Long live the annual meeting. Yeah. The annual meeting is not dead. The annual meeting is different. And as a mutual friend of ours would say, differenter. Good old Glenn. It's differenter. I love that. But the annual meeting will not be dead. If anything, I think to your point, Kiki, people are, when it comes time to market again, we're going to be able to use this time when we could only be virtual to make the point that as great as it is to be nimble virtually and technologically and all those things, people still want to be with people. I was joking with another ASAE fellow the other day. She sent me a quick note about missing a meeting. And I was like, can you imagine if we all get to go to the fellows retreats in June? Who knows if it will go on? But I said, can you imagine what will happen at the fellows retreat? We'll all be walking around just like hugging on each other. We'll like have to move from place to place, like having like touching each other because we won't have touched anybody for 2 months. And it's sort of a joke, but it's true. And I think that figuratively, people will, marketing staff and events people will be able to really position the networking piece better, different, and really demonstrate how it's great we can be virtual. We should be able to be virtual, not because of a pandemic, but because that's the world we live in. And it's also great to be able to touch people and appropriately and hug them and interact with them in a way that you can react to their smile real time instead of asynchronously or near real time and so forth. So yeah, I think it's going to be, we'll be stronger in the long run, but there is a long runway to there, I think. Yeah.
There is. Now, Kate's question that you mentioned earlier has to do with bringing things to the local level. And she's talking about the chapters and finding alternative options for chapters on the local level, where these chapters have canceled most of their 2020 meetings. And it's a major blow to those regions. Ideas, thoughts?
Yeah. So Kate, I don't know who you work for, so I don't know exactly what your chapter structure is like. So generally speaking, right, you have a big spectrum of chapter structures, right? So one resource you might want to go to after this call, and if you don't know her, I'm happy to make an introduction, is Peggy Hoffman. She and her husband, Peter Hustle. Peter and Peggy own a company called Mariner Management. They do a lot with component relations, and I'd be willing to bet you, well, they're great people, and I'm sure they give you yeah, I'm sure that they would give you some good offline advice. So here at ASIS, we have a global chapters 271. They're not staffed. They're largely not funded by HQ right now. They largely make their money by events also. We're seeing them cancel. In fact, they've come to us and asked us what's our guidance or advice. And in fact, we've given it to them, which is basically cancel through May, or at least cancel through April at this point, and then start to see what in your part of the United States or the world, can you stand up a live event safely, right? Because we lead with the health and well-being of our staff, the health and well-being of our attendees, of our members. That's paramount to us. So also the brand piece, the brand protection, you can't be, again, tone deaf to that. We work with people who are risk managers. So we maybe have a different bar than, say, give me another organ, the American Kite Flyers Association. I don't know. They may have a different level of risk tolerance of getting together than, say, a medical group or a health and safety group or a security group or whatnot. Financially, if your global or national organization has the reserves to help offset some of their losses, I would look at that. I would look at ways to support them that don't cost money, and potentially that you could give them grants or loans or something to that effect. But it really is, there's a lot of it depends in your question. But I would just say, I think first and foremost, they need to be concerned about the health and well-being of their attendees, and the revenue piece should come second. And then what options do you all have from your headquarters to help them in kind or in dollar cents?
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing to that.
Yeah, Andy, please. Sorry.
All I was going to say is what virtually all chapters have in common across the globe is that, and I'll evoke Saul Kaplan from the Business Innovation Factory. He has this term called RCUS, which is the random collision of unusual suspects. But I think now is the time. Now is the time if you are if you're in Pittsburgh, and I'll just pick on Pittsburgh for a second, but if you're a medium to large association in Pittsburgh, if you're not talking to Carnegie Mellon and the startups that are coming out of Carnegie Mellon in the technology and computer science departments, you're missing the boat. So this is again a seminal moment in time for associations. I believe that I'm not sure they've ever been the tip of the spear in terms of embracing innovation, embracing startup community, embracing new technologies. It's kind of a wait and see attitude. You can't wait and see anymore, right? You have to experimentation is key to any form of success that you're going to be putting out there moving forward.
Well, let's talk about positive, because not positive tests, but like good things.
Right.
We don't want to cover positive tests, but let's talk about the good things, which is the opportunities that are presenting themselves, because we have to do things differently. We have to do things differently because we don't have the option of the status quo. We have to change. And so how are you changing? How are you approaching this? You talked about collaboration. Talk to me a little bit about how you're looking to embrace this opportunity.
Andy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to something Peter mentioned earlier. It's just, I think first things first, beyond all the internal things we've already covered, I won't go back there, but we're having conversations with people that we normally wouldn't have conversations with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a healthy thing to do. If you're an engineer and your whole community is all engineers and that's all you ever talk to, when something happens, when a crisis happens, right, you might have a good engineering solution out of it, but that might not be a good solution overall, right?
Right.
And so I think now is the time to kind of cross-fertilize communities in ways that they just haven't done before. And, fortunately at ASIS, Peter is showing by example. Peter is having conversations with people at the very top level, and that does trickle down. It opens up opportunities for us to have different kinds of discussions with different organizations, with different focuses, so that we can, again, go back to that word, experiment, and come up with new ideas.
Yeah.
I would build on what Andy said, but I won't go back to things we talked about, but I'd build on this. Oftentimes in my 27 years in this business, I've been asked about my network. And I don't say this from a place of ego, that I don't want to come across that way to people that don't know me. I don't mean it this way. You cannot start a network in the middle of a crisis.
No.
Any place I've ever worked, anybody I've ever met, I've tried to treat respectfully and decently, and as they've got something to offer me, and then I got something to offer them, whether I've worked with them or I've volunteered with them or I've gotten to know them over the time. You and I are an example of that. We've never really worked together. We've never really volunteered together, but we kind of run in these spheres. And I've always, I hold you in high regard, as you know, but I've always tried to treat people a certain way, such that, and now this is going to sound really, I don't know, Machiavellian. I don't mean it to, because I don't know when I'm going to need you.
Yeah.
And you don't know when you're going to need me. And if in the middle of a crisis, I can't call up the 5 CEOs of the biggest competitors of whomever I serve, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a leadership problem. Mm-hmm. And I can't expect to do that in the middle of a crisis. Oh, hey, Kiki, I know you don't know me, but, and we crap on each other all year long at each other's events. And, oh, you want to collaborate? Yeah.
Right. Now that I need something, right? Yeah, right.
Now that I need something, right? And so I don't say that I form gratuitous relationships, and I really don't. I try to form genuine, legitimate, realistic relationships, but it's in part because you never know when you're going to need it. And I think in this time, and Andy made the point, we are reaching out to organizations that would normally be seen as competitors. Mm-hmm. Most of us, well, to my knowledge, we all have mutual respect for each other. They might have something else to say, but and those relationships have helped us. I've been able to reach out across our association communities network. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? Who's your expert on that? Hey, can my comms guy talk to your comms gal? Hey, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that. I'd also say, we had already, to put ASIS in a bit of context, I came here 4 years ago to an organization that was in significant trouble. And this team of people here are what has basically rebuilt almost from the ground up this $34 million global organization. And we put systems and processes and structures in place, right, to address what we had to address. And those right now, we're completely upending them. And I think I've got to be careful from a staff perspective of burnout and, oh my God, we were just going to hit a stride and bam, COVID came. Yep. And let's take a minute to acknowledge that, right? Let's go through the funeral of what was, and then let's go to the wake, where it's going to be an Irish wake, right? And where I think we are very fortunate, though chance favors a prepared mind, because we've built this at ASIS, we're ready for it. We got to give people time to catch up. We got to give people time to deal with what's happening in their personal lives. And this is going to smack us harder and harder for the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. And we're going to have to juggle that. And then what's it look like on the other side? But even where we have Terry, I mentioned the amazing Terry Anderson, Teresa Anderson a minute ago, our magazine person, she's been through Terry's on her 3rd pivot. And now we're like, okay, now we want you to pivot and we want you to do la, 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 la. And she's like, okay, how do you want me to do that? And the or conversation here is starting to help a little bit, because I think people are like, how is Peter going to get and out of all this, right? And Peter already came to the conclusion Peter couldn't get in. It took him a little bit. It took me a little bit. I kept thinking maybe there was going to be a way, but I realized we're talking to the executive leadership team last week, there's not. So it's just constant iteration. Even when I was at my last organization, where I was for about 15 years, if I look back on it, and I did not do this by design, I swear, when I look back on that 15 years, every 2.5 to 3.5 years, we pivoted and we reformed. We restructured to some degree. That doesn't mean layoff. We pivoted because we saw what was coming through our foresight work that we did. We called it Scouting the Future. We pivoted because the market demanded it. We pivoted because the budget demanded it. Whatever it may be. And at ASIS, we're doing much the same, but make no mistake that it's because of the great people that work here and the systems that we've put in place that have allowed us to be able to react the way we're about to, and the way we are.
And Kiki, I would add, and you and I were talking about this before this call started, this session started, that I believe that one of the biggest questions is going to have to be answered in that recovery time that Peter talks about, like post what we're feeling right now, is from a recruitment standpoint, is how did you as an organization handle this internally? I think this is a question that will define organizations and whether people want to go work for those organizations, because they should have an answer for that question. A person interviewing and being recruited because of their talent should know where they're going, is going to be in an environment that cares about them, plain and simple. And so that is on the horizon, and we're trying to think about things like that going down the line. How do we have a great answer for that question?
It's such a fascinating thing. If you weren't caught in the middle of it and you didn't know that you had friends and colleagues and members and people who were really contending with some harsh realities, maybe even you yourself, if you just objectively step back and watch everything unfold, it's a fascinating thing to see how people are responding and communicating, how solutions are already popping up. Some are working, some are not. And to see the opportunity that's available. And I think communication wise, when we talk about associations, everyone always talks about how risk averse associations are, how we're supposed to be very stoic and very, people need to trust in us. They need to believe that they can rely on us. And at times like this is when we provide the resources. I say we as associations. We provide the resources, we provide the community, we provide the trusted voice that's able to be there when things get hard. But this is also a time when we're allowed to have a little bit of it's safe to be a little bit vulnerable and share. You don't have all the answers, because if you were to do that, people would see right through it. You're able to say, we're solving this together. And I think that is that building trust piece. And it's just fascinating to see how people are responding.
Yeah, I agree with you. Years and years ago at my last job, I worked with a woman, a volunteer leader. She became our president. Her name is Elizabeth Pullen. And I'll be really honest with you, when Elizabeth was coming up through the board ranks and other things, and she wanted to run for president and come up the 5 chairs at the time that they had there. And there was a lot of doubt because she didn't seem like maybe the right leader at the right time, let's call it that. And Elizabeth taught me something, and I will never forget it. And she's still a friend. In fact, I would have seen her coming back from picking my son up at Auburn in Charlotte if I had had time. Members aren't your friends till you leave, and then you find out if they're your friends. She's a friend.
Right.
She came to ASAE last August for the Key Award thing. Surprised me with coming. Wow. And so that's just the kind of person she is. But she taught me something. She told me something that was so profound and so simple. As she was coming onto the executive committee, we were going through a particularly difficult time at AIHA relative to some strategic planning issues, long story short. And she pulled me aside in a meeting, getting a cup of coffee at a break, and she's just sort of observing. She's somebody who's a processor. And she says, Peter, I think one of your biggest challenges as a leader is you don't ever want anyone to see you sweat, and you don't want anyone to know how the sausage gets made. You want to be able to have your team make the sausage, your team sweat. You don't mind sweating with your team. You'll show them the vulnerability and all that. But when you come before the board or a committee or this or that, you want it to be all like pretty in a bow and look what we did with the volunteers that helped us. But she's like, sometimes, now these are industrial hygienists are process people. So let's be clear that culturally they like to see how the process gets made. Yeah. And she's like, us seeing how the process unfolds would help you, having less stress on you and your team, and help us see the process. And so we went through some experiments with it. It was a very difficult pivot for me personally. Is not how I'm wired to let the members see you sweat. And it was one of the best pieces of advice anybody has given me in 27 years professionally. And I use it to this day. And Andy hit it on the head. There's no time for me now to not appear like I'm not vulnerable, like I'm not upset about what's going on with our tour, for my own family safety and security, for my team safety and security, for how we're going to get through this. I want to show people enough of that because I'm human. And I think this is a time for that. And I think Andy makes a good point.
I had a conversation I'd never had with someone this morning, as an example. And Peter, I haven't even been able to catch you up at this. I have the dubious distinction.
Now.
Yeah, sure. All right, great. I have the dubious distinction of being the only person at ASIS that is bringing on a new employee during this time that we're closed. And so think about, even from a communication standpoint, it's kind of an interesting challenge, onboarding a person to an office they can't go to, right? And figuring out a solution. And so one of the things we came up with as a solution, we have a great IT department. They were totally on top of it. Our HR department was totally on top of it. But part of that discussion with that individual today was coming up with a plan together, right? Because we haven't worked together before. What do you need to succeed? And asking for certain patience and flexibility in that, and realizing that it's not going to be, again, perfection, but that's going to be in terms of my landscape of challenges coming up in the near future. That's one of them, and it's one that's weighing heavily on me. And I have to look at things differently. I can't onboard this person the way I would onboard in a normal situation. And so all these things are popping up, to your point, Kiki, of things that we didn't think we have to deal with, and do you have to deal with them?
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough. We're at time. I can't thank you enough for being here and for talking with us now. You've certainly left me with all kinds of ideas and thoughts about future.
Hey, we're here to serve, Kiki. That's what we're here for, right, Andy?
So glad you are. And I'm so glad you dressed for the occasion, because I saw I
wore a jacket. Oh my God. It's any consolation. I came to the office without my computer. I got here. I'm like, where's my Surface? I'm like, oh, hell, I left it on the counter. I walked right out of the house. I really looked at it and walked right out of the house. So our office is officially open. So a brain was somewhere else. Apologies. I'm wear my best black suit the next time.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, only the best, please. No, this is fantastic, and really, you've given us such valuable knowledge and some insights. And I have to say, everyone, these are some very difficult, challenging times, but the opportunity that's there to show a little bit of humanity, to show a little of empathy, and to work with people. This is when some of the most creative most innovative ideas and solutions can really pop up, because, you know, we've pretty much cleared the board of a lot of this is how we're going to do it. And now we have to figure out how is it going to be done now? So that's what we've got in front of us. And I hope that this inspires you, helps you, and also maybe helps you feel that you're not in this alone. We're all feeling it, going through it together. If people want to get in touch with you guys, how do they reach out?
Yeah, I can. Want me to type in our email addresses here?
You can definitely do that. And just, you know, if you want to reach out to them by email, in the show notes later, for those who are listening, I'll give you some information. You can go, and I'm sure you have contact information over on the ASIS website too.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. You can look at our resource page. Andy and I are happy to help you at whatever we can do.
Wonderful. So thanks to all of you. I hope you've learned something helpful today that will help you. Please join us next time. And until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So have a great rest of the week, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.